Welcome to our masterclass dedicated to exploring meaning of pain and how to heal it. We will be using the methods of Qigong, which is Tibetan shamanic Qigong, to develop the ability to not only heal ourselves, but also heal other people. And that's something that is particularly exciting because we will be able to help other people develop not only the ability to overcome their own pains, but also potentially prevent the pain. So, on this note, I have my apprentice Sean Hall joining me today. Hi, Sean.
Hi, Lama. Thanks so much for having me and for putting this on.
Absolutely. Yeah. Let me get the ball rolling with our exploration of working with pain by first asking you what you think is the reason why there are so many people in pain. There are obviously a lot of people, millions of people seeking medical health services, seeking medical attention, taking a lot of pills and other drugs. Why do you think there is so much pain in our population?
Well, I feel like because we are a society that kind of runs away from it and ignores it so much, we tend to kind of think of it as not there. And although that might temporarily, like we can use our minds, right, to tell us it's not there, right?
Yeah.
Or we can go the other end of the spectrum and just, focus on, identify so much with our pain. But yeah, I feel like since we're a society that try to pushes that away, we're constantly becoming more and more attuned to just disassociating with our bodies and escaping the pain so much because we decide that pain is something that we need to avoid constantly, and it's not something that needs to have attention. It's something that we need to avoid. So
Well,
it just
it's
kind
kind
of
of a natural thing for humans to run away from pain and seek pleasure, isn't
right.
it?
Yeah, that's that isn't that Freud's like a pleasure principle?
Yeah, and I'm sure that Freud did not invent hedonism. The ancient Greeks were particularly good at it. And so we basically naturally don't want to feel pain.
Mm,
Naturally, we want to experience more pleasure and run away from uncomfortable feelings.
mm,
Well, interesting thing about that is that uncomfortable feelings, and especially physical pain, are not just a nuisance that we want to get rid of because it has no reason to be. In fact, there is a particular reason for pain to exist, right?
I believe so. Yeah.
And so instead of considering it just as nuisance we want to get rid of, perhaps it would make sense to look at pain as an important physiological feedback mechanism that
Mm,
gives us the understanding that something is not working properly, something is compromised or disempowered.
mm,
Maybe there is an energy blockage. Maybe there is a physical obstruction or injury. And so
mhm,
just dissociating from pain, dissociating from a body is not going to help because where attention goes, energy flows. And if we do not pay attention to the area of affliction, we literally deprive that area of the opportunity to heal.
exactly. Of those, like I said, we can pretend that it's not there, but that won't awaken those endogenous healing powers that already reside within us. So absolutely.
Yeah, I like that endogenous term because it literally means created within.
Hmm.
So today we're going to be exploring some of the principles and the applications of how to awaken that healer within ourselves and also how to apply it specifically to dealing with pain.
Let's do it.
Now, first of all, let's consider that there are different types of pain.
Yeah.
And first and foremost, we are talking about physical pain today. There are emotional pains and mental cramps and all kinds of other pain that basically are not the subject of our today's masterclass, but we will definitely look into them in our future broadcasts. But today we're looking at the physical pain, and it also happens to uh, exist in two main categories, right?
Mm.
The chronic pain or acute pain.
Hmm.
So what's the difference between chronic and acute pains?
Chronic tension being, or let's start with acute, I suppose, because that's what we're most familiar with, because it happens and we can't ignore it. It's the thing that we feel immediately and we're going, ow. We even say, that mantra, right? Like, ow. And then chronic pain is typically something that is building up over time that we actually do to ourselves, right? It's something that we're tensing up, and it's hard for us to take responsibility for chronic pain because we think that, oh, this is just the way that I am, instead of actually taking responsibility and really taking matters into our own hands. And it's difficult to deal with, and that's why sometimes we, instead of dealing with it ourselves, I believe that's why we reach for those pain pills, or reach for go to the doctor and just kind of pass it to somebody else.
Right. Well, also what's important about it is that we are learning how to recognize that pain, which is usually a sign of something going wrong in the body,
Hmm.
is actually not something to suppress or kill. It's like killing a messenger.
Hmm.
Instead, we're learning how to bring pain into our awareness, but not to overwhelm ourselves, rather to develop awareness and therefore ability to address. So basically, without awareness, we can't really address the pain. And
Exactly.
by addressing the pain, I mean not only just recognizing that there is pain, but also recognizing that we can do something about it.
Hmm. Yeah, and that's something that, again, it's kind of like it's knocking at the door, and the more you ignore it, it's going, but I'm out here, it's cold. Let me in, like bring me into awareness. And that's what's another interesting thing is, like, it's kind of like our central nervous system that's really is the one knocking too. It's if we just continuously ignore it, it's kind of like we're unconsciously allowing our body to deal with it and just kind of go on automatic pilot. And so we're really separating our body from our pain and saying that this isn't a part of me. It's not a part of my process. It's something that I need I need to push away so that I don't experience this. I can somehow transcend from it by just pushing it away.
So, how do people push away pain?
Well, I, for one, when I incurred I had a thyroid, hyperactive thyroid. Um, and when I was diagnosed with that, I was really curious as to, why this was all happening. And for me, my metabolism was speeding up. I was feeling aches and pains and soreness from my body because my body was in constant stress mode. And so what I did is I went to my endocrinologist and I said, hey, I'm feeling like pain. I'm feeling all these pains. I'm feeling really like tired. And she was like, sure, wrote me a prescription. And, I was taking pain pills. I was taking muscle relaxants. I was trying to deal with it in the way that I was kind of raised or conventionally brought up to think, was that if I'm having pain, there's something that it's a problem that needs to be solved. And the way to solve the problem is to pacify it. And,
Well, in
and
fact, instead of pacifying the problem, pills such as muscle relaxants and painkillers basically just kind of delay the experience or maybe sweep it under the rug, just covering it up
right.
and sugarcoating pain may be one way to deal with it, but you're not dealing with the root cause. You're only dealing with a symptom.
Exactly. Exactly. I like the what is it's I believe is a Buddhist or a Zen kind of con, trying to heal the plant by tending to the leaf, right? Like you can use all the topical creams you want. You can use all the water it to death, but that's not gonna heal it. You actually need to bring attention to the roots of the plant, and that's absolutely the case. We need to really find out what's going on internally and bring attention, by even just starting with externally, like, diagnosing the problem and paying attention to the body and really observing what's going on.
Well, and an interesting thing about that also is that when we address the root causes of pain, then the pain usually is not going to persist
Mm,
because we actually deal with the reasons why the pain is there in the first place.
mhm.
However, if we just suppress the symptoms and do not address the root causes, as soon as the painkillers wear out or wear off, the pain comes back. And often we
Exactly.
also get addicted to painkillers or get so used to them that they do not really work anymore. And so that basically creates a vicious cycle of dealing with pain without addressing the root causes of pain.
Exactly. Yeah. And my experience with painkillers is not only do they temporarily relieve that pain, but they also over time make you want to just ignore everything. It's kind of like when you dull a sense, you're not only dulling the senses, the unescapable ones, the unavoidable suffering, but you're also escaping all the things that are good, essentially, because you're numbing everything. You're not just numbing your pain. You're numbing your personality. You're numbing the joy in life. It's all kind of just like,
Well,
you
we only
know,
have one brain, so once you numb it, it numbs everything.
exactly.
So that's a really interesting way to deal with pain, and that's not how we want to deal with pain. So let's see how we can explore the four primary ways that we are going to address the pain, and mostly working with chronic pain.
Right.
Obviously, we can also work with acute pain, and there are certain applications of the same principles that we're going to discuss today that can also have a good effect on the acute pain.
Hmm.
When we're talking about most of the applications today in the context of our masterclass, I believe it would make sense to first figure out how to work with the chronic pain, because chronic pain is obviously something we do to ourselves
Hmm.
unless we experience chronic pain as a result of the old injury or car accident or
Right.
something else that happened that traumatized us. And even then, the chain breaks at the weakest link.
Right.
But we recognize that even when we receive trauma or experience an acute pain, it's a weak link
Mm.
in the system. Why is it that we get injured here rather than there? Well, some of my students and fellow martial artists sometimes say, well, why did I get injured here? It's because I got punched here.
Yeah.
Well, but why did you get punched in this particular area or place in your body, not elsewhere?
Hmm.
Because you left it open? Because you didn't pay attention to it? Where attention goes, energy flows. If you pay attention to the area of your body, you actually make it more empowered.
Hmm.
And it's not going to get injured as easily or as frequently. And even in the context of martial arts, when people say, well, I got hurt here because that's where my opponent punched me.
Right.
Well, most injuries, even in the context of martial arts, not to mention most other sports, are self-inflicted injuries. It's not even what was done to us, it's what we do to ourselves through training, or I should say, through inadequate training routines, or
Right.
through stretching and pulling our muscles or hurting ourselves, or doing ourselves more harm than good by engaging in certain culture or movement that is deficient or disharmonious. So,
Absolutely.
well, and you probably have some experience with that too, also through yoga, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Being a yoga teacher, I've seen it happen so many times where we don't really accept that we need to take that much responsibility for our pain. We kind of, I mean, I've had students come up to me so many times and say, how do you do this? Or how do you do that? And, you know, how can I keep up with the class? I feel like I'm always falling behind.
Hmm.
Well, you know, when sometimes I see in their bodies, I can just see it right away that they will often train one part of their body by doing the same things over and over again. Because, for instance, there's vinyasa classes, which you do a lot of chaturanga and upward dog and downward dog, and there's so much focused on the pecs.
Yep.
You know, these are all muscles we can see in the mirror. I remember one time you said, we love seeing those muscles in the mirror get bigger and bigger, right? But we don't pay attention to the antagonist muscles. And
Yeah.
so this will obviously cause this imbalance, right? And it's not being able to accept the fact that we need to be able to really fine tune these muscles and get familiar with both the antagonist and the agonist muscles. So when we have a muscle that is um, overwhelmingly pronounced, then it's going to overwhelm the muscles antagonists. Like I'm constantly pointing at my pecs here. My pecs were for a long time much stronger than my traps. And so, and I couldn't figure out why I had so much back pain. Right. And so I'm working these muscles out and going, I'm looking pretty good. I'm not feeling the greatest, but you know what? I look pretty good anyway. And these muscles will overstretch the muscles in the back because they're pulling constantly. And you see
They're
a lot
being
of
weak.
really strong people. Yeah. And they're like rounded like this because their muscles are being pulled this way. So in yoga specifically, um, knowing that we can overstretch muscles, we can become so imbalanced in parts of our body, even when we think we're super healthy, that we ignore the fact that if we have this imbalance, we're going to cause more harm than good. And it's hard sometimes, especially to talk with people who are so fitness oriented that they want to kind of fit in a certain box, you know, in a certain, they want to look a certain way, you know, the big biceps, big pecs, you know, they just want to have this specific subtype of body instead of really getting into, okay, do I have an ability to actually balance things out so I'm not constantly overstretching? Can I actually fine tune these muscles so that I become more and more familiar with how I can be more well-rounded and actually experience flow? Like really, if we're talking about vinyasa, flow, I mean, that's what it means. It means to
Yes,
flow.
it means
So
flow in Sanskrit.
we
Yes.
don't, yeah, exactly. We don't want to just, you know, have all these magnificent flowing movements, but we actually want to experience flow within our bodies. We want to embody that flow. And I believe that being able to first bring attention and accepting the fact that we have this pain, and then acting accordingly. So we're not just pushing through our practice, right? Kind of jumping beyond our edge, essentially.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that competitive yogis, the ones that feel like, oh, I'm
Right.
falling behind my fellow yogi practitioners,
Right. I used to
or
be one. Yeah.
they basically push themselves over the edge. And then, of course, what is out beyond the edge of the comfort zone? Well, there's discomfort, there's pain.
Mm-hmm.
So, in a sense, it's a self-inflicted injury. Just like in many other sports, athletes are often, almost always, trying to be better than they used to be, better than their competitors, better than some role models. So basically, they are trying to perform better and better. And sometimes the dream of better performance is residing outside of their comfort zone. As a matter of fact,
Mm-hmm.
almost always our dreams and aspirations are somewhat outside of our comfort zone, because if they weren't, we would be embodying, we
Right.
would be living our dreams by now. Now, let's look into a very specific method of creating that balance by engaging the weak muscles, the muscles that are antagonists of the strong, well-developed muscle group, so that there would be greater balance. So you were just making this example, or bringing up this example of the pecs versus trapezius. And also there is another little muscle called rhomboid that is also implicated in this imbalance.
Absolutely.
So would you walk us through a simple exercise or practice that would help us create greater balance between the muscles we see in the mirror and those we can't?
Of course. Yeah, I would love to. And first I thought it would be great to actually talk a little bit about, if you do have a muscle, for those of you who are out there that have tension somewhere, you can do the same exercise, maybe focusing on a different muscle. And I would focus on the muscles where you do feel tension. Like we can even, this one's pretty easy, everybody could even join me with this, is your bicep against your tricep. Right? Where you have, like I even have tension on my tricep today. So I might have been overworking my bicep, which is pulling on my tricep. My tricep's underwhelmed. It's not being paid enough attention to. So I can actually engage my tricep by going into concentric contraction of my tricep. But I have to tense up first. I'm really bringing attention to my tricep by tensing it up. And you can even bring it down to really shorten the muscle at the same time you're tensing it up. And then you don't want to just constantly tense it up. You actually can, you can do that doing isometric contraction. But in order to get more of that free flow of energy, if we can actually begin to bend at the bicep, now we're getting eccentric contraction of the tricep and concentric contraction of the bicep. And I'm tensing up my muscle just like I would if I was looking in the mirror and I wanted to look good for myself.
Flexing your muscles, quite literally.
Exactly. Or the beach is that way kind of thing, you know? So tensing the muscle up and then going back into that shortening by bringing the arm down and feeling how once I bring my arm down, I can see that now I'm doing eccentric contraction or elongation of my tense bicep, and then shortening or conscious contraction of my tricep, and then bending at the bicep again, tensing up this bicep muscle.
And you can probably go even further. To go through full range of motion, your hand can go all the way behind the back of your head.
Yeah.
Like you're doing pullover. This is the exercise that really puts the triceps through full range of motion.
Full range of motion. That's exactly, and I love that about this this form of strength training, is that it's not limited to just linear movements. You can actually go in any direction, tensing up these muscles. And this not only gives you strength, but it gives you flexibility. So specifically, right, we can go up and down, like you said. And we
can even do it with both arms at the same time.
Of course, yeah, you can even do one arm and then the other, right? So you can have fun with it. It's not, again, it's not limited to using weights. Like we get tied into just, gravity goes boom, right? And that's it. We work with this, and that's the muscle we're going to engage, and that's as far as it goes. However, if we begin to engage all the surrounding muscles as well, we can get all those stringy fibers that don't normally get attention. And it's like, I may look like a stringy guy, but I'm pretty strong because I do a lot of this strength training, and I get all the muscles. I don't just get one part. I'm not huge in my biceps, but I focus on really getting all the stringy fibers so that I get more of that strength built around the muscle as well.
Well, in Chinese internal arts, and perhaps in some other disciplines like this, they also use the term the tendon strength.
Yeah.
And it may be not a precise label, because it's not really about just strengthening the tendons, but it's also about training more fibers of the same muscle group to work at the same time.
Right.
Now, the muscles can become too strong for the tendons. And sometimes people actually tear their own tendons by engaging the muscles in too much contraction all at once. We don't want
Right.
that to happen, so we have to
As
also
in,
strengthen our tendons as well. If we do this gradually and mindfully, like we're doing right now, actually would allow us to develop both the strength of the tendons and, importantly, also develop the muscles in a way that they're not operating at just a relatively small percentage of the muscle fibers, but
mhm.
actually train much greater percentage of the muscle fibers to fire all at the same time, which means we don't have to bulk up to gain greater strength.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree 100%. And in fact, speaking of percentages, thinking of that in terms of, okay, here's 100% of my strength. I know what that feels like, right? And we can do that really well when we do isometric contraction. However, when we begin to move and explore the range of motion as well as your strength, it's better to go maybe just 70% or 75% or even 80, but staying low enough to where you don't cause the spasm, you don't cause yourself discomfort. Um, However, it's important, like you said, since we have growth on the other edge of that, on the other side of the comfort zone, we want to be able to explore it and instead of just constantly pushing ourselves beyond it. And I believe that a lot of this application and a lot of the energy arts that we practice are such a great way to really to pay attention, right? And I think that's a good segue into the next thing, which is maybe being attentive of the breath, right?
Well, before we go into breath, let's see how we can address the pain by shortening the muscles that
Oh,
are
of course.
in pain or that are compromised passively. We just
Oh, that's
looked at
right. Yeah,
active shortening, but there's also a different way that we can do that, and that's passive shortening.
exactly.
To wrap up the active shortening, if anyone is still not quite clear about why we would engage in strengthening our muscles, let me just reiterate that those muscles that are sore or hurting are not strong ones. Pain is not a sign of strength, it's a sign of weakness.
Mm.
So if there are muscles antagonists that are stronger than the muscle in question, then the antagonists may be operating at a relatively low percentage of their full capacity,
Mm.
maybe 50% or less. However, the weaker antagonist, the muscle that we feel pain in, may be operating at full capacity or even trying to operate at a harder, trying to work harder, operate at a more than 100% of its capacity, which is impossible, especially in a sustained way. And of course, that's why it feels overwhelmed. And basically, overwhelmed muscles starts complaining, sending signals to the central nervous system. I can't do this work. I'm overworked and underpaid. I'm not getting enough energy. I'm not getting enough glucose, or I'm not getting enough ATP, or the molecules that basically deliver energy into the muscles. And so what happens is that a muscle start sending these signals of alarm.
Hmm.
And that is an invitation to train that muscle. It's also an invitation to do something else, to contract, learn how to contract it consciously. Because if you hold the tension in the muscle unconsciously, you can't quit doing it because you don't even know that you're doing it.
Exactly.
It's important to learn how to consciously gain the ability to contract that muscle in question, and then consciously start reducing the contraction. Why is that? Well, it's because there is no signal of relaxation that central nervous system sends to the muscles.
Hmm.
Central nervous system has a mechanism for reducing the intensity of the signals, basically by inhibiting those signals within its own mechanism, but
Hmm.
there are no signals of relaxation that central nervous system sends to the muscles. So what we need to learn is how to gain the conscious ability to choose how much signals of contraction to send, more or fewer. And we do this by first training this muscle and making it more tense,
Hmm.
which is kind of the opposite of what most people think they should do. They think, well, it hurts already. Why would they want to tense it up more?
Right.
Well, we want to tense it up more only to the edge of the comfort zone, just like you said, Sean,
Mm.
just to bring awareness to how we do this.
Yeah.
Maybe even connect neural pathways that allow us to consciously send signals of contraction to this muscle and exercise our free self-agency, free
Exactly.
will. I am consciously doing this so that I can also consciously stop doing it.
Right. Yeah, being able to, exactly. And that's what I wanted to elaborate more, is like, as far as fine tuning your muscle contraction, right? I mean, the muscle is two abilities. It consists of contracting and relaxing, but we can also engage our muscles to a certain degree, so that we're always becoming more and more aware of, okay, I can get to this certain percentage and I'm not pushing myself over the edge, kind of like that whole scale from 1 to 100.
Right.
And then again, bringing the unconscious into consciousness. Like, uh, one of my favorite quotes by Carl Jung is, until you bring the unconscious into consciousness, it will rule your life and you will call it fate. You'll just, again, just kind of like approaching it with this disempowered idea that, well, it's my story, right? You create a story around your pain, or you create a story around your chronic tension. Like, I've got weak ankles. My dad gave them to me, and I'm always going to have them. Like, I'm always going to have this weak ankle, and I'm never going to be able to escape this, right?
Right. And so basically, creating a story out of pain is also how we do two things. We compensate for pain,
Right.
and that by itself can create a compensatory mechanism that may lead to solidifying the particular way that you feel in your body. Basically,
Hmm.
as you're compensating for something, it's like you using crutch, so to speak. Well, so as you get used to walking with a crutch all the time, it becomes harder and harder to stop using the crutch, because you develop a certain culture of movement and you begin to feel like, this is who I am. I'm a person who uses a crutch. So
Exactly.
basically, it becomes the part of your identity.
Right. Yeah.
Chronic pain often becomes a part of a person's identity.
Mm.
Often people even introduce themselves. Hi, I'm Joe Blow. I'm a man with back pain.
Right. Right.
It becomes so ingrained that even if a person doesn't utter these words,
Yeah.
it becomes apparent when you just look at them.
Hmm.
So in other words, we need to learn not only how to start compensating for the pain so that we can still function somehow, but we also need to learn how to stop compensating
Right.
when it's no longer necessary.
Hmm.
And it's like a crutch. You need to let go of it when it's no longer usable.
Hmm.
The second thing that also happens is that we create a story of the future, how we are going to be because of this suffering or pain that we've created in our own system and our own history. And
Hmm.
so then it becomes a projection into the future of how I'm going to continue suffering and why this should happen to me. And I'm a good person and bad things happen to a good person like me. All this nonsense becomes another form of living a nightmare
Hmm.
in this daily life.
Hmm.
We will have a special masterclass dedicated to addressing the emotional and psychological components of pain.
Hmm.
But let's jump into the next principle and its application of how we can address the pain. And in this particular case, most likely it's associated with either a spasm or um, overuse of a muscle. Like a lot of athletes, for example, overuse their muscles. And then they either have a cramp or just simply feel like this muscle is in a constant state of tension.
Hmm.
In other words, it's still receiving signals from central nervous system to contract. because muscles are not stupid to just hold tension for no good reason.
Mm-hmm.
Why is it the central nervous system still sending the signals of contraction? Maybe it needs to recognize that this muscle no longer needs the signals of contraction.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a very clever and extremely efficient way to do that, to basically create a new way of communicate between the muscle and the central nervous system in such a way that central nervous system just stops sending signals of contraction to the muscle.
Exactly.
And that's really easy. It's so, well, I should say it's simple. May not be always easy, but it's extremely simple. For instance, let's say if it is a biceps, we were just working on the biceps. So if there is the tension in the biceps, let's say you overused it by doing biceps curls or some other exercises, maybe you're doing chin-ups, and your biceps is either in spasm or seriously tense. It may not be an acute pain, but it's something that obviously is kind of on the edge or in between acute and chronic condition. And it persists maybe for days or even longer. So what do? We actually do exactly the opposite of what most people think they should be doing. Most people would probably think, I should stretch this biceps because it's short.
It happens in yoga all the time.
It happens in yoga. It happens in martial arts. It happens pretty much in every sport. It happens in dance. It happens pretty much everywhere. Because we humans aren't particularly good at recognizing cause and effect and connecting the dots. Mm-hmm. Now, the inability to recognize the cause and effect connection, which is what we also call the law of cause and effect, or karma, is the cause of suffering. Ignorance of karma is the main cause of suffering in human life. So what we do, we actually connect the dots. We recognize that there is a really simple way to recognize, to understand why this muscle is still holding tension and being so sore. The same thing may happen in the back. For example, back muscles may be sore. It may be pain in the neck. It may be pain in the ass. It can be pain in any part of the body. Mm-hmm. It can be pain in your internal organs even. Let's say in your sphincter between the esophagus and the stomach, or in the duodenum, or in the sphincter of the bile ducts. Mm. All kinds of little muscles exist in the body that basically can go into spasm. What do we do with a muscle that is overwhelmed or overworked and underpaid? Well, we actually pay it more. But first, we do something that it's trying to do. This little muscle, or big muscle, that's the biceps, for instance, well, we actually help it manifest its dream. It's like we can imagine, what's the dream of this particular muscle? Well, in this case, it's the flexion of the arm at the elbow. The dream of the biceps is relatively simple. Now, what we have to do is to actually help it manifest its dream. We literally bring the arm into this position, passively allowing the muscle to shorten. Yeah, you can even bring the arm behind your back. If you have flexible enough, you may be able to even grab the hands behind your back, or not showing off, we can just shorten the biceps. Mm-hmm. Now, something really remarkable happens. When the muscle is not in this position, in some longer position, it's being stretched perhaps, the muscle sends the signals to the central nervous system that's being stretched or that's uncomfortable. And the central nervous system, of course, will respond by sending signals of contraction because it's the only type of signal that it can send. But if and when the muscle in question is shortened to the position that it was trying to achieve, basically, we help it manifest its dream. Something really remarkable happens. It will communicate to the central nervous system. mission success.
Mm.
I've been struggling to achieve this for a long time, and finally I manifested it. Maybe even with the help of somebody or something else. Like basically, I am no longer requiring the signals of contraction. I no longer need the signals of contraction from central nervous system. Thank you very much.
Mm.
Well, once the central nervous system gets this signal from the muscle, it will take a little bit of time, usually a relatively short amount of time, minute, minute and a half, sometimes 2 minutes, sometimes 3 minutes if it takes this long. However, the central nervous system will stop sending so many signals of contraction. Maybe not dropping it like a hot potato, but reducing it gradually. Either way, the muscle will actually stop receiving signals of contraction.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens to the muscle when it no longer receives signals to contract?
It starts to relax.
Exactly. That's what muscle starts doing. It starts relaxing, and when it relaxes, it also starts lengthening. And you basically wait for that to occur before you allow it to lengthen fully.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
something really important happens in the process that indicates to us that the lengthening actually is happening, or it's about to happen. The muscle is ready to relax. We watch the breath, right?
Mm.
What happens to the breath when you're ready to relax? It's a sigh of relief.
Yep. Big sigh of relief typically comes up, or even a yawn.
Yeah. It's because the central nervous system becomes less agitated. When it stops sending signals of contraction to a particular muscle, it's not only the only muscle that it stops receiving the signals of contraction. The central nervous system becomes less agitated, stops sending signals of contraction to many other muscles throughout the body, including the diaphragm, the breathing muscle.
Mm-hmm. But initially it sends that kind of signal of contraction just so it can go, sometimes we even get that little kind of thing. It just kind of, it's so interesting how those are connected. And it's beautiful when it happens, because you really do, it's like this warm kind of feeling that you feel all over your body once it happens.
Exactly. And the beautiful thing about it is that just like we were working with contracting or shortening the muscle first before we release or let it go, the same thing happens with breath. You first have this tentative inhalation, or maybe even serious inhalation, like when you yawn actually starts with the inhalation. And so that is something we can play with in just a few minutes, but essentially I keep using this method that is almost counterintuitive. You go into shortening before allowing the muscle to lengthen. You contract before you become stronger and also become more relaxed. You inhale before you exhale and have a sigh of relief. All of this is almost counterintuitive, except if you're familiar with reverse psychology, you know that it works superbly well, not only with the muscles or other parts of the body, but also with other people, right?
Exactly. Yeah, you can embody that sense of relaxation by going into it further and paying attention to it more. And in yoga, we have what's called stretch reflex. If we go, I mean, that's not just yoga, but stretch reflex happens even if you're not a yogi. You'll just move a certain way, you'll twist a certain way, and the body will go up, and it'll go into that shortening. And your central nervous system is going, okay, shorten, shorten, contract, contract, contract. And until you say, okay, now I'm actually going to give it what it wants. That's the only time, like you said, when the central nervous system goes, okay, he's got this. I'm gonna back off now. I can, my job is done. I sent the message. They received the message, obviously, because they were able to relax. And again, that sigh of relief came up, or whatever came up, whatever body signal that came up. And it is truly, I believe that our biological feedback, when that kicks in, as soon as we pay attention to it, we can constantly be in that state of presence and awareness when we practice or when we move or when we shuck and jive, throughout our day. It's important to constantly bring attention to ourselves and say, okay, how is my body reacting to this? Not only physically, but energetically. You walk down a dark alley and you tense up, and we can go further into that when we have the whole masterclass based upon emotions and those attachments and things like that. But it's super interesting knowing how to listen to the body, so you don't just use it as like transportation for your head. I mean, this is more than just transportation. This has got so much intelligence. So tuning into that for sure.
Exactly. Well, we have a couple of other principles that we were going to discuss today. Let's take a look at another one that is dedicated to release of tension through manual shortening of the muscle or a particular tissue that's been compromised. And in most cases, compromised tissues are the stretched out tissues. On some occasions, you may experience an injury through impact that may compact the tissue and basically cause a bruise, for example. But again, the bruise or hematoma is where you burst some blood vessels, maybe lymph vessels too, and that creates the flooding of the tissue with the bodily fluids. But again, once it starts flooding, it actually starts expanding, and that expansion hurts. So even when the injury happened as a result of compacting the tissue, the resulting hematoma is actually also stretching the tissues, and we can compact them manually. And when we do that, something really cool happens. Maybe you can walk us through this process, would you, Sean?
Of course. Yeah, and especially when I teach my Tai Chi or yoga or Qigong, we don't have to know all these muscles. We don't have to know how the muscle even works exactly. We just want to be able to know where the pain is. So by just bringing attention to your pain and then saying, okay, so the muscle has to start somewhere and end somewhere. So being able to bring the muscle and the attachment to the insertion. It's better if you can use two hands on these muscles. So bicep is one. We've talked a lot about the bicep. Let's move on to going into...
Most people are familiar with the muscle is called the abs or rectus abdominis.
Exactly.
You may want to tilt your camera just a tiny bit lower so we can see your tummy, but it's going to be an obvious and relatively easy muscle to connect with.
So we focus a lot on contracting this muscle, of course, right? We do a lot of, you see all the ab workouts and everything like that to make sure we have strong abs, but we also can do this by just relaxing our back and bringing the abs attachment and the insertion back to the origin closer together. So by just rounding your back, you can bring this muscle into a passive shortening. You can also
manual shortening right now, right?
Oh, I'm sorry, manual shortening. So you can take your hands, place them to the lower abs and to the upper abs, and bring them closer together. Even taking your hands and making this smaller. So essentially, once the muscle is tense and it feels like it's gone too far, and it might even be spasming, bringing attention first by palpating around to find where it is in the abs. Like we have cramps, right? We typically get cramps. That's the muscle going into a spasm. So we can manually shorten these. And a lot of people will tell you even, right? They say, just take a bunch of your stomach and pinch it. And they'll just say, pinch your stomach. Well, there is some truth into that. But really, it's about getting the entire muscle group.
And it's not about harassing the muscle into relaxation.
Right.
It's more, again, about helping the muscle achieve or manifest its dream.
Right, exactly. I like that, harassing the muscle, because we will often do that when we go to a massage therapist. We say like, dig in there, get in there. Oh, I can take it. Trust me, I can take it. And really, and the person's sitting there, they're trying to get that muscle loose, and they're trying to make it, relax. And it's kind of like when you have a little kid, right? And the kid's going all over the place, and you take the kid, you go, relax, relax, shaking it to relax.
That's going to work great.
Yeah, exactly. So we don't get violent. Instead, we, be compassionate and really understanding. And what's the best way to be compassionate and understanding to another part of yourself or another being, is to really listen. And so bringing that attention to that part of the body that needs it, by listening first and foremost, accepting that there's tension, and then acting accordingly. Being able to bring the muscle closer to its, from its attachment to its insertion. So another example would be the pec. So starting, since it's kind of like a fan, right? Feeling to where you to a part of the pec that has this tension, and palpating around to where it feels like, okay, I feel a lot of tension right here, and bringing it closer together. So really manually being able to bring those two parts of the muscle closer together. So then the muscle has no other choice but to be shorter, and you just take this shortening to relax over time. And a lot of massage therapists will say, oh, it takes 30 seconds, or excuse me, 90 seconds. After 90 seconds, don't you worry, it'll be just fine. And that's, acupressure, or what do they call
Yeah,
that? Trigger point. Trigger point, they'll use the 90-second rule. But really, it's completely up to you. It's that listening to that biological feedback, so that you're not just saying, you're counting the minutes and you're looking at the watch instead of yourself. You bringing attention to yourself, again, that's the first step. So don't lose that step. Listen to yourself, listen to your breathing pattern, listen to those biological feedback mechanisms that kick in until to where you finally start to go, ah. And I think it's important not to just release it once you feel that feedback, but it's important to say, okay, so I'm starting to feel more relaxed. I have a sigh of relief. I can start to slowly come out, keeping my hands where they are. And then what do we do from there? Once it's gone shortened and it relaxes, we can even go further with this. So we want the muscle to be long. We want it to be supple. We want it to be malleable. And we don't want them all to be short. We want them to lengthen. So we go into a process of lengthening by actually bringing the hands, keeping the hands where they are, but then going in the other direction. So still having your attachment on the origin and the attachment, and then going into lengthening. So again, it's important to get your
Affects
hands
not
on where
only
you're
the
touching.
muscle that we're working on, it also, interestingly enough, affects the connective tissue lining around the muscle, called fascia. Because if
Right,
the muscle has been bunched up or short for a while, the fascia around it also gets used to being short.
exactly.
And then even if your muscle relaxes, the fascia may not let it lengthen all the way because it's used to being short. So
Right.
we actually need to also facilitate the process of lengthening, just like we initially started by facilitating the process of shortening or contraction of the muscle. So there are two flows. Basically, there is a flow of shortening or contraction, and
Yes.
then it reverses its direction and turns into the flow of relaxation and lengthening.
Yeah. And fascia, I'm glad you brought that up. Fascia is super interesting. It can take up to 2,000 pounds of force. It is heavy duty. We think that our skin is the largest organism or organ, excuse me, within our body, but it's the connective tissue that connects everything. So fascial adhesions, when they are bound up like that, again, a lot of people will take techniques like gua sha, or they'll shear and tear technique, kind of like to break everything up. And while that will begin to it may work on certain degrees, but you'll still, it's another way of just unconsciously just bouldering your way through it and just trying to plow through the pain, because it is more painful. Trust me. I've done lots of gua sha, and I thought, man, and Rolfing is just another way, just like pulling that muscle apart to get it to stretch more, to lengthen more. But the fascial tissue, it needs care. It needs that attention. It needs to be able to you need to be able to comfort it in a way, and work compassionately with it, instead of just you know, taking a hammer and just, trying to hammer it out.
We don't want to punish the fascia for being sharp.
No, yeah.
What we also want to do is we want to hydrate fascia. We want to actually allow the bodily fluids to flow through the fascial lining. And that is something that is important, because if the fascia is dehydrated, it tends to shrink.
Yes.
Like a shrink wrap. And so basically, it's another really important lesson from today's masterclass is to keep the fascia hydrated.
Yes.
Most people do not really hydrate themselves sufficiently. Well, of course, they're going to be in pain because they are shrinking internally. And so that is another really simple and extremely effective way to take care of your own bodily discomforts and pains. Which is simply hydrate yourself sufficiently, not just with pure water, but even better yet, with water that has some minerals and electrolytes.
Yeah, of course.
And preferably not also not just sodium, which is an effective electrolyte, of course. No, not just the table salt, but also calcium or potassium. Basically, the salts of potassium need to be in balance with the salts of natrium or sodium in the body in order for the muscles not to spasm. Another reason why muscles are spasming is because the potassium and sodium are out of balance. And it's almost like yin and yang forces out of balance. Basically, the positive and negative electrons in your body need to be more or less in balance, so that when the signals of a contraction arrive to the muscles, they do not overwhelm the muscle tissue, which is what happens when we have too much sodium or too much natrium chloride in our system. And so that is another important lesson also to take away from our class today.
Absolutely. Yeah, we can even imbalance it through taking supplements of electrolytes, and not really. I mean, that was what I fell victim to. I knew that since I was sweating so much, because I was doing a lot of yoga, and hot yoga specifically, I needed electrolytes. So I was doing all these electrolytes, and you can actually imbalance your body by doing too much of them. So you have to find that balance, not do too much. Know when you feel dehydrated, know when you need the nutrients, and specifically getting those nutrients through food, I feel like has been my biggest lesson. That's what I need to do, is make sure that I get a balanced diet, so I'm not I'm always going to supplements to make sure that I have my electrolytes. Knowing that supplements are good if you need them, but don't do them habitually. Otherwise, you can throw yourself completely off balance.
Yes, indeed. Well, the last but not the least is a very simple and elegant way to work with some muscle tissues and also some parts of the body that are not even muscular. Like, for example, you were talking about fascia and skin. If, for example, we have a skin abrasion or wound, we may not want to touch it. If we have a superficial abrasion or open wound, it probably is either covered up with a Band-Aid, or we don't want to engage in some active muscle shortening and release of tension, because it's going to be adding insult to injury, so to speak. So what are we going to do? Well, there is a really cool way to deal with that. And that is imagining that we can breathe through this particular part of the body. Quite literally. imagine that you have a blowhole in this part of the body that is afflicted or injured. Like dolphins and whales. They have blowholes in the back of their heads or the back of their necks or somewhere in the back. What if you could imagine having a blowhole, and that blowhole allows you to breathe through this part of the body, wherever that part of the body may be? It can be a finger, it can be a toe. You can imagine that your arm or your leg is like a snorkel and can breathe through it. It can be in your back, it can be in your front, it can be in your side, it can be in some of your organs, internal organs. For example, you can imagine you can breathe through your liver. If you have a problem with the liver, bring attention to that part of the body. Why? Because where attention goes, energy flows, which is exactly what facilitates healing. Without energy, healing is virtually impossible. As a matter of fact, one of the main reasons why ill health happens is because of energy blockages. In other words, the energy gets blocked and either stagnates or becomes deficient. So what happens when you bring attention to the part of the body, you actually facilitate a greater flow of energy brought to it as well. And imagining that you can breathe through any part is one of the easiest way to bring attention to it. You literally focus your attention on this particular part of the body. For example, let's say I'm going to pretend like I'm a dolphin. So I have a blowhole in the back of my neck. So I'm going to breathe through the back of my neck. I may touch it with my fingers, but if, for example, I have a whiplash or injury or an open wound, I'm not going to touch it. I can just imagine breathing through it.
Mm.
As I breathe in, I contract my diaphragm, distend my stomach. As I breathe out, I relax my diaphragm and contract the muscles in my stomach and obliques. So it's a natural diaphragmatic breath. But instead of breathing like we would normally do, focusing on flow of air through the nose, we start imagining that this air flows through the afflicted part of the body. In addition to the flow of air, and we may also visualize the flow of energy. Breathing in, every time we breathe in, more vibrant life force into our body from the environment. And letting go of any old and stagnant energies we no longer need as we exhale. And this flow of breathing going through this part of the body brings immediate and very effective attention to this body part. Like right now, for example, I was just imagining breathing through the back of my neck, and the back of my neck feels really relaxed. It also feels a little longer, almost like my neck extended by half an inch.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that? Well, maybe there was a little bit of tension in the back of my neck. In our future masterclasses, we will also explore some scanning techniques that allow you to identify very specific areas in your body where there is some tension or discomfort or pain. And of course, that also may lead you to developing a greater ability to bring attention to specific areas of the body that perhaps before you didn't used to bring so much attention to.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this breathing exercise has a lot to do with a little meditation that we wanted to finish our masterclass today. Isn't it, Sean?
Yes, sir. Yeah. Kind of like how we talked about when we bring attention to the parts of the body that are afflicted. Not only can we use this meditation of visualizing the blowhole there to help us breathe and relax through that part of the body, as well as noticing those the feedback that you get once your muscle is in that state of relaxation, and that's yawning. Yawning is a perfect way to notice, okay, I must be relaxed. We don't typically yawn when we're tense or stressed out, right? So the same thing happens physically. When we're really relaxed, that sigh of relief comes up or that yawn comes up. So for those viewers that are watching this that are actually able to lie down or sit down, make sure you're not driving your car when you try this next one. You want to be able to lie back or sit back and take a few moments and see if you can close your eyes. And as you maybe even take some deeper breaths, so you can kind of notice if your diaphragm is relaxed or if you can relax your stomach. So a lot of people will chest breathe. See if you can bring your breath all the way down to your lower belly or your stomach so you can feel your belly rise and fall. And then as you begin to deepen your breath, you might even notice that just the thought of yawning will make you want to yawn. But if you're not able to yawn and you need some help, you could try inhaling as you open your mouth and taking the tip of your tongue and placing it to the roof of your mouth as you inhale, slightly opening the mouth, tip of the tongue.
An interesting thing about it is that when you bring the tip of the tongue to the roof of your mouth, see how you can keep your mouth slightly open, but breathe through the nose. That's a really paradoxical condition where your mouth is slightly ajar, but you're breathing through the nose.
Yeah.
You literally press a reset button in your entire nervous system. You literally create the condition where your mind cannot think for a moment. Because that's what happens when you yawn. For a moment, when you yawn, there are no thoughts in your mind. It just completely goes blank. For some people, it's just a split second. For others, it may be half a second, maybe a full second, or even longer. But the idea is that it works like a reset button. And we'll have the whole yawning meditation practice that takes advantage of the fact that we can press this reset button and enter into a state of clear mind without any thoughts at the drop of a hat.
Oh yeah, and once you start, you can't stop. Sometimes it's hard to stop, that switch. But in spontaneous movements, sometimes even happens. So I often have my students, when they're ready, they can bring their arms. Typically, we're on the floor. This is a lot in the yin class. They'll reach their arms over the head. Add some spontaneous movement. Really helps the yawn.
Especially after yawning, when you become more relaxed, the body starts moving more spontaneously because tension is frozen movement. So until we release the tension, spontaneous movement is hard to come by. But once the tension is gone, the body actually wants to move naturally. There is no life without movement. So as long as you're alive, your body wants to move.
Exactly. That is
and you simply remove the impediment.
You know you're alive.
You simply remove the impediment on the path of the flow of spontaneous movement. You may also notice your eyes may start watering after yawning a few times, which is an excellent proof that you're entering an altered state of consciousness.
Altered state of consciousness, yeah.
Like I said.
Yeah, I tell a lot of my students that, and they're like, what? Really? I'm like, yeah, yoga can be that very much, and just being able to pay attention to the breath and noticing, oh, wow, yeah, I do feel different. Like you feel a little bit different, right? That's a change in your consciousness. So entering that altered state, it's beautiful.
Yeah, we can call it yantra yoga.
There we go. Yeah, those little yantras that you say when you're done.
Yeah, spontaneous chant that comes out naturally. You don't even have to memorize the chants. You just simply allow it to erupt spontaneously.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, this, I think, is a great way to wrap up our exploration of working with pain. I'm pretty sure that both of us are a lot more relaxed now after doing all these practices, and I really hope that everyone who watched this video became a lot more relaxed and free of pain as well.
Mm.
We will continue doing this type of explorations, and also we'll have questions and answer sessions where we will be happy to answer any questions and maybe even coach a person or two who would volunteer to occupy the hot seat, so to speak. And that would be a great opportunity for members of our community to step into the role of a recipient of this coaching for just a few minutes, maybe 10, 15 minutes, and actually receive the benefits free of charge.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's a great way to experience it, especially if you're unfamiliar with this type of coaching. This makes it very distinct. It's a type of coaching that you're able to embody these, we talk about, I want to be more grounded. I want to be more centered. I want to be more present. Well, we have to really practice it. And it's very much an embodiment of those concepts that we constantly talk about. We don't just leave them in our heads. Again, we want to bring it into the body. So yeah, I believe that would be a fantastic exploration. So
wonderful. Well, I will look forward to that. And if anyone has any questions or comments, please leave them below this video. I will be happy to either answer them in the comments or weave the answers into our next masterclass, which we will be holding in our new group. The new group is called Flow and Thrive, and that is the group where we'll be offering these classes on a more or less regular basis. So please go to facebook.com/groups/Flow and Thrive. I look forward to seeing you there. Namaste.
thank you, Lama. Namaste.
Thank you, Sean. Take care.
Take care.